guys, as you can see, the garden is on its last leg, so I'm down today to get lots of this cut back and ready for the new season. For anyone that doesn't know, my name is Peggy and I am growing a cut flower garden here on my allotment in Kanagawa Prefecture, Japan, which is just south of Tokyo in USDA Zone 9B, hence this gorgeous weather in November. Thanks for checking out my channel. As you can see, my zinnia are all starting to look, they're gone. They're looking very sad, but underneath these I have my sea holly, my orangium, and some scabious and some echinacea coming through. So it's time to clear these out and let these guys underneath have a bit of a better go. I've also got my poppy and gladiola already at the back there. I've got to cut down this firecracker vine, and then I need to look at things that I didn't expect to be in the garden right now. Okay, so right here in front of my firecracker vine is where I had my flamingo feathers, this pink statice. They weren't flamingo feathers, they were pink pokers. This is where I had my pink pokers. They look a lot like flamingo feathers, just smaller. And I thought these would be gone by this point, but they're not. They keep giving me little bits. Now I'm using these in dried flower arrangements, and I quite like these little pokey bits, so I'm going to keep these here. But I've also realised that in my zone, these can be a perennial. So when I do cut these back, I'm actually going to leave them here and I'll just have to rearrange my garden plan a little. I don't have very many of them here, but I'm going to leave them and see if they'll come back for me next year, because I really liked having these. They were nice and they've been going for a really long time now for me. So these will be staying. This is my chrysanthemum. Now I had some white chrysanthemum here that's been going since October, and these are December flowering ones. So these are going to stay, and again, these are a perennial, so even when these are done flowering, they're going to be staying in place. So I have to change my plan a little for them as well. And finally, my straw flower, which are absolutely huge. They're so big and they're so healthy. They are still putting out a few flowers. They're definitely starting to slow down. But again, in my zone, these are going to be a perennial, which I'm really happy about. Now, I do have more to put in next year, but they're a different colour. These were a mix of kind of orange and reds and pinks and purples, and I had a few whites as well. The ones that I've got to go in next year are more of the kind of soft peachy coral colours. So I'm really looking forward to having both of those next year. Again, these are great in my flower arrangements, but I'm also drying them and using them in my dry flower wreaths and things like that. So I'm really liking these. I didn't realise they would get this big. I mean, they're huge and healthy. So I'm really hoping that when these finish flowering, that I can just leave them in place and they're going to come back for me again next year. Again, that means that I was planning on putting my next straw flower here behind my chrysanthemum, which is where my poppy and gladiola are now, and the idea was when the gladiola died back, I could plant my straw flower in there. But since these are already here, I want to keep them all in one block. So I'm going to have to change the plan to allow for that as well. Yeah. But other than that, everything that was in the garden is ready to be cut back. So I'm going to start here with my dahlia and get these all cut down. Usually when I cut things back in my garden, I only cut back to the kind of bottom stump, and I leave the roots in the ground to make sure that there's some roots in there. It just kind of helps with your soil, helps with the animals to overwinter hiding in the roots and things. And in dahlia as well, when I cut back the stalks, I usually leave them on the ground. Dahlia have hollow stalks, and that's perfect for animals to be living in over the winter and make their little nests in, and that's good diversity for your garden. But I'm not going to do that this year because my dahlia and my zinnia both suffered really badly from powdery mildew. You can see here is one of my zinnia leaves, and it still has powdery mildew on it. And powdery mildew can survive the composting process, and it can survive in your soil over the winter. So I want to get all traces of this out my garden. So today, everything's coming home with me. Okay, my dahlia are cut back and bagged, so next is onto my zinnia. And again, because these guys had powdery mildew, I am going to be bagging them up and taking it all home. So one of my last chores for today is to cut back my firecracker vine, and I feel a bit bad about this because it's not been flowering for very long. There's obviously still a lot of flowers on it, although it has kind of collapsed down on its own weight. But a few things. One, it doesn't seem to be liking the cold, and now that it has got a little bit colder, the flowers aren't as pretty, they're browning faster. It's not having a great vase life. It's kind of fun and funky in the vase, but it doesn't last very long. It's not drying well, it's just turning brown, and then the little flowers pop off it as well. And so I need this frame to be planting my sweet pea, which is the only thing really I've got left to do in the garden. So this was kind of an experiment to see what would happen. Would I have something? I thought it was kind of nice autumnal colours, but really it came through too late. My straw flower are still here. I'm getting a few chrysanthemum, but apart from that I don't really have much to pair it with, so I don't really have a need for it. If it was in my garden, would I plant it? Maybe, but it is a really viney vine, so I'd be worried that it took over the garden quite quickly. So you'd have to have it in quite a contained area or stay on top of cutting it back to make sure it didn't take over your garden. But for me, it was nice while it lasted, but it's coming out. I didn't realise how much of that there would be, and I don't have a bag big enough to put any of it in. It isn't perfect, but it's a big improvement. I've been here all day and I'm starting to lose the light, so I'm going to have to stop there. But thinking of how the garden looked this time last year compared to now, it's amazing. There's so much more. Last year when I cleared this out, there was literally a bunch of poppies left, and that was it, I think, in the whole garden. Whereas now I've got ranunculus, I've got ponytails, I've got Daucus dada, I've got some of my rudbeckia, which is perennializing, I've got my poppy in, my gladiola, I have one echinacea, one scabious, and my sea holly, my eryngium, which have perennialized and are going to come back for me. I've got my daffodil bulbs, my anemone bulbs, my freesia in, I've got the chrysanthemum still going, I've got my straw flowers still going, I've got my dahlia and my tulip in there. Down at the bottom there I've got a little bit of crimson clover, which I'm not sure is going to come back for me. It didn't do much this year, but I thought it might come back again next year. And some salvia as well. I couldn't get my salvia to do very much in the vase for me this year. I don't know if it was just because it was too small, it was too young, or I was doing it incorrectly. But it's still going, so I'm just going to leave it and see how much of my things at home germinate. I did have the problem last year where I had a plan of what was going to go in the garden, and then a lot of things didn't germinate. I didn't get as many things germinating as I wanted, and then when I got them in the garden, some got eaten by bugs, some got it got too hot too fast, and so I've got so much started as autumn sowing or fall sowing this year at home. I've already got a load more echinacea and scabious. I've got my achillea that's actually germinated for me this year. I've got some geum going. I've got my stalk. I've got lupin. I've got my snapdragon. You know, they're all ready to go in. So I'm really pushing to have spring be my big flower time in the garden, having learned that it just gets too hot in the summer for most of the things in here. So I'm looking at spring and autumn flowers to be the winners for the garden in my zone and my climate. But this is a pretty good start to it, so I'm really happy with how it's going. If you want to see what I do with all the flowers from my garden, you can check out my Instagram page, which is From the Witch's Garden, and there is a link to that below this. If you want to see how all this goes and what's going on at home with my seedlings and how we progress throughout the rest of the season, then remember to hit the subscribe button below and follow along with us, and I will see you guys next week. Bye!